you say royalty, the first thing that comes to my mind is eating profit, like you said. However, let's say it's a 10% royalty.
Regardless of if it's a 10% royalty, I had someone say, well, that's too high. And I said, okay, well, what are you getting for that royalty? And they had no idea. So I challenge everyone, go in, figure out if that's the business that you're interested in, but what am I getting for that royalty? What kind of support? Do I have a coach traveling with me in my territory? Follow-up training.
Tell us a little bit about the first franchise. You kind of told us you got into it because, a franchise consultant convinced you. What type of business was it?
Yeah, so we looked at a lot of things. Subway was the big brand then, and they said, well, we could look at it, but it doesn't sound like you want to get into that business. So we started with what I do exactly with our candidates, with the families we work with. What does this business look like? And I was very clear. I worked on Wall Street. The writing was on the wall. It was 2007 when I first started the first business. I saw what was coming.
I'm going to ask you to generalize a little bit because I understand that every franchise is going to be different. Walk somebody through. Like, let's say that I sell my property management business next week because I'm just tired of tenants and toilets. So I've got a small exit, and I'm looking at franchises. I go to a local franchise show, let's say, or I get coached by you. What are the steps that I would take to choose a franchise, to actually opening my doors, putting my first dollar in my bank account?
Gotcha. So I would advise not even looking at...
I'm Garrett Wong, and this is the Investing to Win podcast. How do you define success, and what does winning look like for you? Giuseppe, a lot of people think about franchising as maybe something that they don't want to do because it's not original. And yet we know there's a tried and true formula. What are your views on that for the general public?
Hey, Gary, that's a good question. When most people think of franchising, they think of fast food. And that's something I thought of 20 years ago getting into this business. So really what a franchise is it's a system. It's a system in place that you can follow, you can execute, and you kind of have everything figured out from the very beginning. So I always challenge people to say the widget almost doesn't make a difference. The service, it's not something you have to be passionate about, but you do have to have demand, obviously, in your local market. But it's plug and play. You execute, you follow the system, and you don't have to. You can really focus on generating revenue as opposed to what CRM am I using or how do I build a website.
Thing is, and I know that you probably hear this all the time. Well, what about the fees I have to pay? Like, I'm going to be getting all of my profits gone just because I happen to have a different sign out the window. What would you say to that?
It's a great question. And I think the question should be changed as opposed to eating into my profits. It's an expense, absolutely. But I think the better question is, what am I getting for that royalty? What am I getting for that franchise fee? Not every franchise is the same. Let's just put it out there. There's 4,000 franchise companies. They're not all built the same, even brands in the same industry. So really, you're going to pay that franchise fee once. And that's usually for a 5 to 20 year agreement, depending on the brand. They average at about 10 years. And then there's going to be marketing spend, which you're going to spend in any other business. And they're going to have that leverage because they have, maybe 100 franchisees that they can leverage, and they know the keywords and things like that across the country. But that royalty, that's the fee I have everyone look at. And regardless of what it is, they average between 5 and 10%. Regardless of if it's a 10% royalty, I had someone say, well, that's too high. And I said, okay, well, what are you getting for that royalty? And they had no idea. So I challenge everyone, go in, figure out if that's the business that you're interested in, but what am I getting for that royalty? What kind of support? Do I have a coach traveling with me in my territory? Follow-up training? What's the ratio of coaches to franchisees? At the end of the day, you gather all those fees and expenses. You want to know what you could potentially net, and you'll get a good feeling, for every location or per every territory. You'll get a good understanding when speaking with other franchise owners.
It's interesting because, this is going on, how old am I now? About 25, 30 years ago, we had a Chinese restaurant, and my dad passed away in 2000, and my mother was moving. She was kind of snowbirding. That was kind of their dream between here up in Canada and Las Vegas. And then she applied for and was accepted in a local Tim Hortons franchise here, coffee, right? And they wanted me to personally sign for it and be an operator with her because she was in her 60s, right? And so when I looked at it, number one, I didn't want to do that. But when you say royalty, the first thing that comes to my mind is eating profit, like you said. However, let's say it's a 10% royalty. Well, if you're in business, and you probably are or want to be if you're listening to my podcast, a 10% profit margin is kind of what people shoot for, right? Like if you're doing really well, 15, maybe 20. If you're doing really poorly, like under 10%, you really need to do things. But I think 10% is the gold standard. Would you agree that the royalty shouldn't be in the same category as an expense or a profit, because there's other things built in there, I'm sure, like, I don't know, now marketing and advertising, it's a different spend. Would you agree with that?
Yes, and that's the thing. I wish it was black and white, but every franchise will have different royalties. Some will load up additional services in there, and others will have a lower royalty, but then they'll kind of itemize some other expenses. So that's where it gets a little bit tricky. But yes, it's really support, right? You're going to need this support if you have your own startup. So you may be hiring business coaches, and you're really figuring out, okay, how do I get this support or this aid, or who's answering the phone when I have a question, or fixing, something that I'm having an issue with. So it's a overall, support function, I would say, but I wish every franchise would lay it out exactly the same, and they do not. So that's why it's really important when you're looking at the FDD, the franchise disclosure document, you're going in saying, okay, what is every expense? What am I getting for those royalties? What's that marketing fund? What's the transfer fee? What's the franchise fee? You want to get a clear understanding so that when you create that pro forma, you could figure out ultimately, to your point, am I netting 10% or is it 20% based off all those expenses? And then from there, is it a flat royalty, meaning a percentage? There's sliding scale royalties, where as you get larger, sometimes the royalty drops from just say 8 to 6%. We have other brands that just have a flat amount that they charge monthly. So these are important things to ask. A majority are going to be a flat royalty, but you want to get really clear in understanding exactly what that structure looks like.
Okay, let's dial back the clock a little bit. You said you've been doing this for 20 years. Walk us through your background.
So born and raised in New Jersey, first generation, learned English at the age of 7. My family's from Italy. We were in the restaurant business as well. In 1975, my father and my parents opened up an Italian restaurant, had that for 40 years, sold it in 2015. So cut my teeth, learned about entrepreneurship, learned that I did not want to own a restaurant given the hours and, working the holidays, nights and weekends. I'm sure you know exactly the same.
Chinese restaurant.
Same story. Open every day. I mean, it was just
and
nonstop.
You're forced to work, right? You don't have a choice.
Didn't have I enjoyed it, but yes. Yes, you definitely had to go in and help out, or if someone called out sick, you were there. So we definitely appreciate that. And I said, you know what? I think I want to go a different direction. So, went to, got my first person in my family to go to college, got my undergrad Series 7 license while in college, and worked for companies like JP Morgan and UBS. And I had a great career. Things were going really well, made a lot of money, but was miserable. I mean, absolutely miserable with a 5-hour daily commute. There was no end in sight. 5 hours, yeah. New Jersey to New York City, door to door, bus and a couple subways to get to the office. So it was a 13-hour day. Just if you just work 8 hours, it was a 13-hour day. So. I said, you know what, if I don't make a change, I won't see my kids, because we were just starting a family, just like we never saw dad unless we were working the restaurant. So, worked Wall Street, did well. I tried a couple different positions. I just said, this isn't for me. I should really explore entrepreneurship, back to the business. But what does that business look like? So spent a year back and forth researching, and then I bumped into a franchise consultant, a franchise coach, which is what I do today. And he said, well, why don't you explore franchising? And I said, I don't want the food business. Subway was the big brand. He's like, well, it's not all fast food. There's, restoration companies, business coaching, expense reduction, you name it, senior care. Yeah. I'm like, wow, I didn't realize there's just so much, so much out there. So he really turned me on to franchising, and I purchased my first brand back in 2007, my second market in 2008, and been helping people since, so the past 20 years figure out also at the same time if franchise ownership is the right fit for them.
So it's interesting. So when you said you came here when you were 7, so the family had a restaurant in Italy and here, or did they just come here and that was the thing to do?
I'm sorry, I was born and raised here. I learned English at the age of
I
7.
see.
Yeah.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So when they came here, they opened up a restaurant in New Jersey, and 1975 to
7 years
2015.
old.
Yeah.
That's incredible.
I don't remember that. That's the thing. I don't even remember that. They told me that. Yet maybe it's something I blocked from my memory, but I didn't even realize I didn't speak English originally. So
yeah, no, it's just we were talking in the green room audience before just about our children, and well, they're not children anymore, but I don't think that would happen in this day and age. I don't care what country you're in with social media and YouTube. To not speak English until you're 7. I mean, it's just, it's not
Agreed.
done. And so just dialing back a little bit again. So I don't want to make assumptions, but what type of restaurant was it? You said like Italian, but was it like
Italian
pizza,
restaurant? Yeah,
like
we started
full board.
Yeah, we started pizza was originally, and then we expanded it to a full blown Italian restaurant. Nothing fancy, you could bring your family in, and bill wasn't too expensive, and we didn't do a lot of marketing. It was all reoccurring businesses. We had families in there that literally were coming in for close to the 40 years that we were open. Even families that moved an hour and a half away, they would still do their best to come in at least once a month. So we had a great following, great customer base, and I do miss that business. Maybe didn't appreciate it then, but looking back, I miss that business.
So what happened to the business? You said you don't have it anymore. Was it you chose not to take it over, or was it sold or closed down?
Yeah. My parents sold it. They started that business before I was even born, and I was involved. They knew the family really wasn't interested in taking it over. One of my brothers worked there until 2015, but we knew that it wasn't the business for us, but we supported the business any way possible. So I attribute a lot of my success from that business because I learned so much, and maybe you didn't realize it then, but you learned so much about customer service, negotiating, cash flow and investing and all that great stuff. So it was a crash course in entrepreneurship.
It's interesting you say that, because when I hire new staff, so I have a large property management company up here in Canada, and I also have an AI workforce implementation company that I've started. And when I hire people, I actually purposely dig deep and want to know that they've had restaurant, specifically hospitality restaurant experience, not retail, but restaurant, because nobody knows how busy it is until you're working a section as a server and 2 people call in sick, and now you're working 3 sections, right? Like, I don't care. Like, people are just like, oh, I'm so busy at work. No, you're not. Yeah.
You're doing everything. Yeah, you're getting pulled in 100 different directions, and that was difficult. And but you had to see. But that's the thing. You had to learn everything, right? You had to learn how to wash the dishes, to making the food, to waiting tables, to catering, to answering the phone. So you don't appreciate it unless you've actually worked at a restaurant. I will say that.
Yeah, no, for sure. Okay, so tell us a little bit about the first franchise. And so you kind of told us you got into it because, a franchise consultant convinced you. What type of business was it?
Yeah, so we looked at a lot of things. Subway was the big brand then, and they said, well, we could look at it, but it doesn't sound like you want to get into that business. So we started with what I do exactly with our candidates, with the families we work with. What does this business look like? And I was very clear. I worked on Wall Street. The writing was on the wall. It was 2007 when I first started the first business. I saw what was coming. So I said, recession resistance. We want this thing to be not a sexy business, but we want this business that's always going to be high in demand, a necessity type of business that I can operate without having a storefront. Hence, back in the day with the restaurant, with little or no staff, where maybe I can outsource the staff utilizing contractors. Had to keep the investment under $200K. So I gave kind of my guidelines of what I wanted in the business. And we dove deep, why 200K, why recession resistance. We talked it through, and we looked at a short list of different brands. Now everyone has different opinions. We looked at massage types of, not to name names, for franchises. And I said, with the economy going south, those probably won't do well. And I was wrong. They did extremely well, maybe because everyone was stressed out. Everyone needed massages. So they did well. I got into building services where we maintained buildings. We maintained commercial properties. We did cleaning. We did painting. We restored floors and things like that. And in '08, when things were just going south, I said, okay, I have this business. It had a big, '07 was a big year for us. '08 was looking a little bit shaky. Who can we go at? Where can we double down our efforts? And we doubled down on healthcare, dialysis centers, surgery centers, because those were the businesses that maybe the competition had a hard time bidding on because they didn't have the backing of a franchise. They didn't have the insurance and bonding and workman's comp and all that, all the insurance requirements and criminal bonds, janitorial bonds, all that kind of stuff. We had those appropriate amounts that they were looking for. So we broke into healthcare and we were able to service a lot of these locations, understanding that the economy really wouldn't affect them because people still need dialysis. They still need surgery. And so we did a kind of a pivot within the business, understanding that they were going to be the least affected given the downturn in the economy. So it was a good business. We had a small staff. We started with a couple employees. We had at one point 12, or we had maybe 5 support employees, and the rest were filling in, were contractors. We didn't have contractors in certain areas. And we maintained basically buildings in central and northern New Jersey. And we sold that back in April of 2020. We sold that business so I can dedicate 100% of my time towards the coaching business.
So you had the same franchise for 13 years?
13 plus years, yeah.
Wow. So I hear, at least in fast food, because we looked at Subway as well. Ultimately, we had chosen Tim Hortons, but I hear, at least from other franchise operators, that if you're doing well and then maybe there's some attrition that happens, you will be approached, I guess. Was that the same thing in this particular franchise you were involved in, or was the spread not really that? I don't know how many there were in the territory, or that type of thing.
Well, as far as the sale of my business, we put some feelers out. I had a few friends.
No, sorry. Maybe I didn't ask that correctly. It's too early in the morning. Was there ever a question to take over another franchise in the same business for
Gotcha.
you, either in a different state or, again, the reason I was kind of waffling on that is because when you think about Subway, you can have one within a 5 kilometer mile radius or whatever. Was it the same with your franchise?
Yeah. So we covered the central New Jersey market. And I lived in central New Jersey. I still do. And we said, okay, we want to grow this. The '07 was a great year. And I was approached by other companies, other franchises that complemented our business. Like, why don't you invest in a restoration business that can really kind of overlap, and you can add that onto your business, and now you can do water and smoke mitigation, that type of cleaning. And I said, you know what, I'm really liking the business I'm in. And then the northern New Jersey market opened up, and I said, you know what, there's going to be no learning curve. I can take over that northern New Jersey market, and it was a much cheaper investment because all I had to do was pay for a second territory fee as opposed to the full investment of buying another business or a resale that was cash flowing. And I said, you know what? I don't want to pay that multiple. It's not worth it for me. I'm growing this business relatively quickly. I want to keep the investment low, buy that northern New Jersey market, and just knowing what I know from central New Jersey, apply that to northern New Jersey, just finding some staff. So I opened up a second office in northern New Jersey, kept the investment super low, and we expanded because what was happening was we were doing business in central New Jersey, and then they were referring us business in northern New Jersey. So now that I owned and ran 2/3 the state, those referrals were going back and forth. But yes, I looked at complementary brands as restoration. I'm trying to think of some of the other companies I looked at, but they all kind of complemented one another. But there was a major learning curve and learning about mold and all that kind of great stuff. And I said, you know what? I don't have to actually own a mold remediation business. I can refer business because we would go into jobs and carpet would be underwater, and the property manager wanted a carpet cleaning. And I'm like, we can't do this. This is a foot underwater an entire weekend. You need everything replaced. You probably have mold. So I would refer that work out for a referral fee, and the restoration companies would come in and just tear everything out and dry it up. So that was my path with franchising. One thing I coach and tell everyone is that sometimes your intention is to just stick with one brand and, buy that second market, that second location, that second subway, but sometimes it's not available. So when you are looking at a franchise business, ask, how many locations are available in your market. You may want to purchase those in advance to lock in that future growth. Because if you do wait, and again, you don't have to buy more than one market, but if you do wait, we don't know what is going to be available. You may be forced to look at a complementary brand.
So you said a term I'm not familiar with, territory fee versus, because I think of franchising probably like most novices do, of location. What is a territory fee and how does that compare to buying a brand new franchise?
Yeah, so and they're kind of used together. So you buy a franchise. So if it's a non-brick and mortar business, we'll call it a cleaning business. You pay the franchise fee, which includes a territory. From there, so maybe that's $50,000. From there, you're paying another franchise/territory fee if you want to add. So it may be, for example, Central New Jersey, or maybe it's a population of 50,000 in your market. So maybe it's a couple zip codes in your the market you live in. And if you want to add on, you're going to pay another franchise/territory fee for the rights to expand into additional zip codes. So maybe another 50,000 in population or so. So that's how non-brick and mortar franchises work. When you look at a brand like Subway, something that has a physical location, they may come back and say, okay, there's, you can open up to 3 in Houston, Texas, and they need to be within, 10 miles from each other. So they'll give you kind of the lay of the land of exactly how many locations can fit in there. And then once you actually purchase the franchise, then you start looking for the specific building, the specific location you're going to be opening in. Okay.
Can you walk us through the steps and I'm going to ask you to generalize a little bit because I understand that every franchise is going to be different.
Right.
But walk somebody through, like, let's say that I sell my property management business next week because I'm just tired of tenants and toilets. So I've got a small exit. And I'm looking at franchises. I go to a local franchise show, let's say, or I get coached by you. What are the steps that I would take to choose a franchise, to actually opening my doors, putting my first dollar in my bank account?
Gotcha. So I would advise not even looking at brands. As silly and crazy as that sounds, people get inundated with the brand and then they lose track of, what that ideal business looks like. So what I would tell everyone is, number one, get your finances in order. So you don't have to sell the business. You don't have to leave the job. You can still run a franchise semi-passive if it's allowed. But get your finances in order, everything, liquidity, because each franchise is going to have liquidity and net worth requirements before they even set up an introductory call. And then there's going to be the actual investment range, and funding is a whole nother conversation. Then you start looking at the characteristics. Okay, I got my numbers in order. I've already owned the business. I know what it takes to own a business. So what kind of, what do I want? A franchise is going to give you that support structure. So figure out, okay, what is the comfortable investment range? And there's 2 numbers, the range of investment. And if I'm going with a loan, what's the cash injection? So if I go with the SBA, maybe a 20% cash injection. So on a $200K investment, it's $40,000. Now, do I want to what's my venue? Do I want to be in a brick and mortar setting like a Subway, or can I run this thing from home and offer business coaching where I go to the customer? Cleaning, I go to the customer, whether they be residential or commercial. One is not better than the other. It just comes down to preference. If you are going to run this semi-passively, passive investment does not exist in franchising unless you're Shaquille O'Neal and have a huge team and tons of money in place and experience running businesses. So it's going to be semi-passive or full-time. Each franchise will have different requirements. Some franchises don't allow you to run that semi-passive. So figure out the time investment and the time you can invest in this business. With that being said, if you can get past the first year and run it 6 to 12 months and run it potentially full-time, that business can eventually become semi-passive because the team's in place. You have everything kind of set up. All right. So going back to what you're looking for in the business, then we're looking at, the actual city and state you're located in. Depending on the state, that franchise may not be registered in your state. It may not be available in your state. Canada, you're up, located in Canada. Of the brands of the 4,000 brands, only a fraction are offered in Canada. Not all 4,000 are going to be offered. So that's also going to come into play as to, where you're located, or if you're eventually moving to the States, that changes things a little bit. We're going to look at your staff. What does your staff look like, right? It's a crazy question, but what do they look like? You have two options. Are they W-2 employees, or are they 1099 contractors? Is it something that needs to be highly skilled, or is it something that you can really train within a week and train that person on? Perfect example, mosquito spraying. Doesn't take much of training to teach people how to spray for mosquitoes. It's more of what to look for and how to protect yourself and things like that. Role in the business, what you're good at, your transferable soft skills. So I had someone say, well, I was an attorney, and I go, that's great, but we're looking at what are those transferable skills. So we looked at, that person was good at management, negotiation, they were good at sales. That all aligns with who the franchisor is looking as that franchise avatar, right? Who is their ideal candidate? Who's their ideal person that does well in the business? So listing these out, and there's plenty more, but listing all these out saves you a ton of headaches, ton of time, ton of anxiety, because now you've listed what your ideal business looks like. And then when we speak, we go through that list, we dive a few layers deep on each one, and then we go to the market and say, okay, Garrett, what is available, in your market? What is registered? What can become available in the near future that checks off all these boxes, so that we can make an introduction to the brand. So you could dive a little bit deeper, where they're going to give you the agreements. They'll have you speak with other franchise owners. But the trick here, kind of going back to the very beginning, is figure out what your ideal business looks like, not the widget or the service, but what the ideal business looks like, the structure. And then from there, we can definitely find you that perfect franchise and give you a few options so you can compare and contrast a B2B business, which is going to be a little heavier on sales, versus maybe a B2C business where the marketing and call center are all handled for you for your roofing business. So we spent a lot of time there kind of reviewing options and different ways of running the business.
Okay, so I have chosen my business. Now I contact them, and I imagine there's an application. What do they vet on my side to make sure that they want me?
Yeah, so another great question. So if you contact them, first of all, you hear a lot of times, I never hear back from the franchisor, and you are one of thousands of people contacting the franchise. So don't expect a return email right away. You may not get a return email. So keep that in mind. And it may just be that they're inundated, they're just small, or maybe we're not available in Canada. So instead of saying that, they just you may not return the email. But once you do get a call back or an email, they'll set up more of a right fit call. We do this for our candidates, and usually you get a response back within 24 hours because the franchisors know we've had 3 calls, that you understand the process. You spoke with funding before that intro, so it's a different setup. But if you're going direct, they'll set up an intro call. They'll make sure that you meet the requirements. They'll learn a little bit about you. You'll learn more about the brand to figure out if that fit may be potentially there. If that fit may be potentially there, they may have you fill out a survey or a form. They may send you the franchise agreement. Every company does it a little bit differently. And then they'll set up a second call where they'll do a little bit of a deeper dive. Again, still trying to figure out if the fit's there, but they may cover a topic like finances. They may cover a topic like territories. What are all the markets? And, is there enough market available in my area? They'll eventually put you in touch with franchise owners to speak with and validate. And then if the fit is there, we'll call it 4 weeks or later down the road, they'll invite you to a discovery day where you get to meet the franchisor in person and I always say, get to meet the captain steering the ship.
Okay. And then I've now been approved, whatever it is, fast food, service business, whatever it is. I know that's where it varies, because I know that for the Tim Hortons franchise, we were required to go, I think, spend several weeks at the, training. I know every franchise is different, but let's just cover food, let's say, okay? Bricks and mortar, fast food. what are the next steps normally?
Food. So when you're in a brick and mortar setting, first thing is let's find you a location. So usually there's going to be a third party involved. Immediately, let's look for the location. You're going to tell them, I want to be in Houston, Texas. We got 3 locations. Well, which area do you prefer? North end, south end, east, west? Figure that out, and then they'll do traffic studies to figure out the exact location that would work specifically for that franchise. Mm-hmm. There's going to be they'll introduce contractors for the build outs. This whole process could take depending on how big the location is, if it's a standalone building or not. But if it's a standalone building, you're looking at a year plus easy. If it's a smaller boutique fitness massage franchise, maybe less of a build out. I always say 7 to 12 months to get up and running, and that depends on the contractor, how quickly they can turn this location around. But as soon as you find the location and you figure something out with the landlord, then it's contractors. Let's start the build out. And what they do is they will estimate an opening. We'll call it January 1 of 27. And they'll say, okay, what do we have to do to drum up business? They will start the marketing, 30 or 60 days prior to opening. So fast food, drumming up business, got a new location. If it's a gym, they're signing up members for you, trying to get you to become cash flow positive before even opening up the doors. How many members do we need to break even? Given our cost 50, great. Let's try to get you at 50 plus so that you're already cash flow positive, covering all your expenses with the membership fees. So, and so they kind of give you this list, kind of a checkoff list. This is what you should be doing. 60 days prior to opening, we're doing the marketing, and maybe you're hiring staff. If you need a general manager, that's the time to hire that general manager and all your support staff. So they'll walk you through the time frame based off of the estimated opening date, and then give you kind of like a checklist. These are the things you need. Now you need to get the profit and loss put together and talk to our accounting department. Let's review the marketing. The marketing is going to be done for you, but you still have to manage and oversee the KPIs and look at the ROI and things like that. So they'll give you this long list to check off. And usually you're assigned a coach, and that coach is understanding you're probably overwhelmed at this point. So they're making sure that answering your questions, addressing concerns, and going over that checklist with you.
Wow. So much there.
Sounds like a lot, but it's all handled for you, basically.
One of the things that you had said, that magic word, S word, support at the beginning, but I'm also thinking marketing. And the thing that just crossed my mind, because I've been in property management for 30 years, mm-hmm. and I think about 10 or 15 years ago, property management started to franchise a little bit, right? There's a few national names. And so I know that support is automatically there, but I'm just thinking marketing, trying to get branding, and just customers opening through the door, and learning finances, all these things that I learned through the School of Hard Knocks. And yet you have a coach that kind of walks you through that. Speak to me about the marketing part of it, because I think that's what a lot of people miss. And how does that work typically again, I know it's different, but if you can give some generalizations.
Yeah. So in a B2B structure business coaching, expense reduction, that's one of my favorite industries. There's going to be less marketing done at the home office. They're creating more assets you can use on social media. They're using, they're creating newsletters that you can share, but it's not as turnkey. Excuse me. So you're going to, you're taking more of that sales role, networking with the Chamber of Commerce, small businesses in your market, and kind of running with the assets that they're creating for you. So it's more of a business to business relationship style business. Switching gears into something, fast food or roofing, cleaning, mosquito spraying, you name it, a home service type of business. Excuse my camera has a mind of its own there. I'm not sure what happened there. But in a home service type of business, typically the marketing is handled for you. So they're handling all the digital. So traditionally the way it kind of works is they're going to create a website for you. They're going to, handle your Google ads, Meta ads, SEO. They're handling all of that for you, creating the microsites and the websites. And then from there, okay, leads come in. It usually goes to a call center. Call center is booking the calls for you, answering questions, in some cases accepting payment. And then from there, salesperson, the franchisee or salesperson is going out on the appointment. Now, it's not a set it and forget it. You're still monitoring and making sure the marketing is working for you. That's number one. Reviewing those KPIs, because you may be busy and you may be doing well, but if you notice that across the board, you're averaging a 20% close ratio, but the brand that has 100 franchisees is averaging 40%, something is off. And it's two things. One, it's your salesperson or the franchise owner, whoever's doing the sales, or it's the quality of leads, or actually technically the third option, it's a combination. So you get to review that, maybe even speak with one of the higher closers in the business and figuring out, is it something that the franchisee is doing? Is it the quality of lead? And figuring all that out. Now, the franchisee also is given coaching for themselves or for the staff to do things over and beyond this turnkey marketing. So they're doing things like, hey, should I launch a podcast talking about home services where I get all the trades on? Should I write a book? Should I be going to the Chamber of Commerce every week? In restoration, you're probably visiting plumbing supply stores and working in relationship building with the local plumbers. It could be after every job, we put a lawn sign down and knock on doors, letting everyone know, hey, we were in the community, we restored this roof, we saved the homeowner X because it was a liquid roof type of product. Love to give you an estimate. So they're going to give you other avenues in order to build up the business over and beyond the digital spend.
These are KPIs. I mean, key performance indicators and metrics. I mean, I didn't really dial into those until well into probably my second decade in business, because property, I mean, it sounds like an excuse, but, busy in property management, tenants and toilets and rent. And yet you're out of the gate right away with those things in mind, and to have the data to know that, hey, my marketing spend, my lead ratio, my cost per click, my whatever, like pick whatever marketing KPI is not meeting the baseline that is of the industry is just gold. I think a lot of people miss that when they think, oh, I don't want to give away a 10% royalty.
I agree. I mean, you're getting, so a lot of these brands are producing white papers. They know what the industry average is, 20% close ratio. And then they say, okay, in our 100 franchisees, everyone reports back, they're closing at 50%. So, we do a much better job, and this is how we do things differently. So you're getting everything out the gate. But what I think people forget is you're getting access to everything immediately. Mm-hmm. It's day one. You signed the franchise, and all of a sudden you got access to CRM, the back end, the marketing, the operations. A lot of these home service brands, senior care, business coaching, anything around the home, you're up and running in 3 months or less. You literally are signing a franchise agreement. And to your point on training, it may be a week at the franchisor in person, a week virtually, and then a week where they're coming out, and then ongoing. They'll give you kind of like a portal that you can follow through, especially when hiring new staff. But they want to get you up and running quick. Why? They want you to start cash flowing. They want you to start paying back this investment. The franchisor, there's this big secret of how they make money. They make no money when you buy a franchise. They're reinvesting all that money back. They make their money on the royalty going forward. But for that royalty, they need to give you that support. And they're going to list all that support and how they're going to help you. And you're going to validate and talk to the franchisees and make sure that they're getting that a ton of support after the fact, right? After that first year, after the first 6 months. And they're going to tell you, they have no incentive of lying. They're going to tell you straight out, it's working great, it's not working great, or it's so. So you're going to get to talk to, you don't talk to one, you're going to talk to a dozen different franchise owners, but you're going to hear it right from the person actually running the business. So, but you get everything up and running, so you can literally sign a franchise agreement, be up and running in 3 months, while your startup, may take you years to launch and figure out the branding and the logos and all that kind of stuff. That's the advantage of the franchise, up and running quick, generating revenue. I'm not so concerned about the service as long as there's a demand for it. I'm not, for the most part, the franchisee is not offering the service. So drain cleaning, very few franchisees are actually out there unclogging drains. They're working the Chamber of Commerce and the plumbing supply. You hire employees to do that. You may still go to the same training, which is what I would recommend. Which is what I did. You get a better appreciation of the business, but you're not in there kind of doing the drain cleaning. I would make the argument that no matter what franchise you buy, your role after the first year is relatively the same. It's oversight of staff, oversight of manager. It may be in different industries. You're still over looking at the KPIs, working with your accountant, working with the business coach. Your roles are going to be very similar regardless of the industry you're in.
That's very, very interesting because everybody's, E-Myth, Gerber, the book, working on your business versus working in your business. And from what you're telling me, one of the key advantages, at least from my perspective, of having a franchise is after that initial break-in period, you are trained to work on the business, not in the business, where most people, like I'm in home services, I don't know too many people that aren't still on the tools 5, 10, 15 years, right? And yet that's the mindset that you're trained right away from the get-go. Would you agree?
100%. I'll give the audience a little advice. If you're a roofer and you go to a franchise and say, you know what, I want to just buy a roofing franchise. If you tell them you have roofing experience, there may be a good chance you do not get approved for that franchise. And that's a very strong opinion, and I stand by it. Why do I stand by it? Because a roofer, someone that's been doing this forever, is going to have a very hard time unlearning or kind of following the system of a roofing franchise. That's number one. If they're open to change, number two, the strike two would be, well, now they're going to stay on the roof, and the money is not on the roof. It's not saving a few bucks and fixing the roof yourself. Your money is in the relationships with the property manager that's going to give you 100 roofs, or the new builder in the area that's going to give you 1,000, properties to install a roof and maintain. So they're going to teach you out from the gate. We don't really want you, performing in the nail salon, performing the service or cutting hair. You can, but it's that's the trap people fall in. They get stuck there and then they forget to actually grow the business. So there's always that opportunity cost lost.
So I've been coached extensively that if you're starting a business, you should be really starting it with the exit in mind, right? Correct. Can we talk about exits for a little bit? Because I mean, from what I'm hearing, a franchise wants you to be intimately involved. They don't want it to be a passive. So what does the exit look like? And can somebody truly, like I'm involved in mergers and acquisitions and roll-ups. So that's where you have your platform business and you're bolting on all of these portfolio businesses. How does it work from the mindset of a franchise?
From the mindset of a franchise, so the advantage you have in the franchise is, you have your multiples, right? You have growth, historically 3 to 5x. We'll just use that sure. range. The advantage you have with the franchise is, number one, you have history behind the brand itself. So if it's 3 to 5x, but the last 25 resales got a 6 multiple, well, you can demand a 6 multiple because historically that's what that specific brand in the roofing business was able to sell for. The second thing is the good resales we don't see. I don't see. The brokers don't see. They don't go up on biz, buy, sell. Right. The way franchises are sold are not through, there's no middleman. They're sold directly from one franchisee to the next, assuming that there are franchisees in your market. And that's how historically they're sold. They save themselves a 10% broker fee. It's much cheaper, and that owner, it has no learning curve. They've been in the roofing business. They're just picking up another market, so they're saving quite a bit there. But what I always recommend is you go back to the franchisor, you ask what your options are. Don't sign any agreements with anyone. Mm-hmm. If you sign with the franchisor, then you sign with the broker, you may have to pay twice if there's an exclusivity clause. So you go back to the franchisor. They may have someone that they just spoke with because the market's sold that they can introduce you to. Done. If they don't have someone, they'll introduce and let someone like myself know, the broker community, and there'll be a either flat fee or percentage fee, or you can sign up with a traditional broker. But you are able to sell that business. The one thing to keep in mind is the franchisor still has to meet the buyer. And people say, well, will they blow up the deal? And I said, no, they're not there to blow up the deal, but they have the fiduciary responsibility to say, okay, I know you're buying this business, but keep in mind, you're now going to be part of the, whatever franchise family. We want to make sure you have a general understanding. We want to make sure you go through the training. We want to make sure that, whatever was told to you, we want to make sure all of that is accurate. So let's go through the franchise agreement together, so that, they're not saying, well, you can you don't have to pay the franchise a royalty every month. And it's like, well, wait a second, that's not necessarily true. So they just want to make sure everyone's on the same page, but they're relatively easy to sell. There's a transfer fee, which could be, a couple $1,000 or less, sometimes more, sometimes less, in order to transfer from one owner to the next. And there's really not many other fees. You're selling it just like any other business, just letting the franchisor know what's going on so they can meet the new owner of the business.
One thing that just came to my mind is, walking around a city, and I travel a lot too, and you see these different names, right? One thing so I want to talk about an operator that learns all these skills and then thinks they can go out on their own. Okay. So let's say that I own I'm just going to say sandwich franchise. Okay. Let's not talk about Subway, because I wouldn't want to go up against them like point for point, but I have a franchise, a sandwich franchise, and I'm like, you know what? I'm tired of paying these fees. Mm-hmm. I'm just going to go out on my own. I know everything. Right. So now I'm going to call it Garrett's Sandwich Shop.
Right.
Walk me through the failure rate, because I see a lot of these sitting there, no customers, and you can just imagine what happened, right? Because it looks like it was a franchise. That must happen a lot?
I don't know the actual numbers, because as time goes on, it changes. What's a success rate for a franchise? And I said usually the numbers are much better. The issue is sometimes it's not the franchise. People are just buying the wrong business. I know of people that said, I failed at this business. I said, just let me know, like, how many franchisees did you speak with? And they said one. And I'm like, well, you never even got a full perspective of the brand. So I'm all for, we owned an Italian restaurant. It wasn't a franchise, and we owned that 40 years. We figured everything out the hard way. My parents weren't even from this country, so when they came here, so that set the bar really high for me. My bar is probably higher. Your bar is probably higher than most other people, because they said, you think you have it hard? Try coming to a new country and blah blah blah. And I'm like, okay, well, I can't argue with my parents. But when you have your own sandwich place, right? Garrett's sandwiches. The big thing is, you don't pay the royalty, so you don't have to pay all the fees to the franchisors. It's yours. You still own it 100% like the franchise, but you have 100% flexibility to run it. But the argument is, what you gave up in the royalty, you're not getting any support, right? Unless you have buddies in the business that you're talking with. But that royalty payment, which is maybe 5, 6, 7% or more, that you're saving, now you're losing with your purchasing power. You lose the economies of scale. Jersey Mike's, founded literally a stone throw from where I live right now in New Jersey. Their economies of scale, their buying power, they're buying tons and tons of product months and months in advance, locking in their rates. So if there is a spike in the price of ham, it doesn't affect them because they have purchased that ahead of time. So that purchasing power is big, and the buying power of social media, of pay-per-click, Google, Meta. You're losing all of that. So now you're not getting, so you may be saving that 5 to 10%, but you're giving it back with, your product cost may be 30, 40% higher. Again, I'm not against mom and pop, and that's totally fine, but those are things to consider on top of the national branding that you're now losing. So, but some people, they prefer the startup, and I tell them there's no right or wrong. This is based off of, you owe it to yourself to know the differences between a startup and a franchise so that you can figure out which is the better fit for you. Startups do great. Franchisees do great. If you truly understand, what the business model is. And I'm for either one. I'm not biased in any way.
Yeah. I mean, let me re-clarify, because I think the specific situation I'm referring to is maybe somebody who's been in a franchise already and wants to turn their back on that label and then try to do it on their own. And when I see that in these empty shops, I think maybe that they weren't doing everything that they were supposed to, or maybe it wasn't a strong franchise in the middle. But if they feel like they can't make it only because they're paying that royalty fee, right, probably there's other issues at hand.
yeah, I mean, you may not be getting the support that was needed, and that happens. I wish to say every franchise was built the same, but you and I know that's not the case. There are, even in the same industry like fast food, there's some great brands that will support you, and others that will support you, heavily on the front end, and it kind of starts to taper off. So yeah, and sometimes when that person is out of the franchise and on their own, maybe they didn't realize how much was being done for them, like the marketing. They just assumed it worked. And then now that it's unplugged, you're like, wait a second, people aren't coming in. People don't know, that I'm located here. So sometimes you realize it kind of after the fact, and it's unfortunate, but it's something everyone has to go through if they're, on the fence of continuing with the franchise or not.
Well, I can imagine. I mean, we'll talk about in about 30 seconds about what you can offer for help to people, but I've seen other coaches that tell you how to franchise your business. And so how do you even know? There's got to be a ton of fly-by-night type of, I think we've got a good business. Let's just sell franchises because we want to make tons of money on franchising fees. Walk me through what you do for people, because I've been intrigued, because I think I heard you say about 20 minutes ago that just to get a phone call or to get your foot in the door, to have a conversation, would you agree that having you help opens those doors a little bit easier?
100%. I mean, I make an introduction to a brand, 24 to 48 business hours. Typically it's 24 business hours. You're getting at least an email, if not a phone call, with some additional information, and setting up, a right fit intro call with the brand. Contacting the brand directly, good luck. That's what I'll tell everyone. You could try, you may get a call back, you may not. And there's various reasons why. I feel like everyone should get a response, but that's just not the reality. So, but yeah, we help as far as what we do. And actually, we were talking about this earlier. I wrote a book, Franchise Freedom. It's the same name of my podcast. 48 pages, 30-minute read, free download on my website, ggthefranchiseguide.com. If you're not ready to chat or want some additional information, this is my exact blueprint. We talked about this earlier, and helping you find your first business. It talks a lot more about franchising, the characteristics. It talks about creating a team, financial advisor, attorney, CPA, and what that can do for you. There's psychology in there. There's a chapter on just letting the family know what the heck you're even up to and doing. It'll reduce issues at home, maybe prevent a divorce. If you're buying a home or you're buying a franchise, you're not doing it alone. If you're married, your spouse, or whoever's involved in the household, letting everyone know and letting them know why you're doing it to create time freedom. So mom and dad don't miss any more of your soccer games. So this book is invaluable. I wrote it back in 2020 and launched the podcast. It covers everything. But what we do is we offer a free service. We're paid by the franchise companies, just like a real estate agent. So the service is free to you. We do a 20-minute call. Let's just meet each other, see if we're a good fit, and let's just figure out if franchising is a good fit. We're not going to sell you on franchises. We're going to see what your expectation is, and we'll let you know if you're qualified. You need money to buy a franchise, and unfortunately, not everyone I work with has liquidity, and which I would say you're looking at about 50,000 liquid, 150,000 net worth. And I go over this on the call, but you got to have some money to invest, plus a financial buffer. But we'll figure out together if the fit's there and the interest is there. We'll set up a second call. We'll go through all those business characteristics you want to include in the business. We'll introduce a funding partner, go through your funding options. And then by the time we have our third call, we'll look at 3 brands, all different from one another, that check off all the boxes of all the things you want and all the things you don't want, and giving you that perfect mix of maybe B2B and B2C and maybe a brick and mortar business that you can continue the conversation with. We support you every step of the way. There's never a charge for our services, and we'll work with you. We set up calls typically once or twice a week, answering questions, advising on maybe questions you should be asking franchisees and the franchisor, setting expectations. You're not talking to franchisees on the first call. You talk to them later, right, after figuring out if it's a fit, and then eventually visiting the franchisor. So we help in every step of the way. We cover all of the United States and Canada. We have a full-time team that just pre-screens companies. So this 4,000 universe, is kind of funneled down to a much more manageable number, less than 10%. So it's basically the top 5 to 10% of brands out there. We really scale it down. So it makes life simpler in figuring out what that brand looks like. And everything is customized to your situation. So it's basically a reverse engineer process. Start with the end in mind. To your point, I want to sell in 5 years. I want to create a legacy over the next, 50 years. There are going to be two different approaches, maybe two different brands we take a look at.
Incredible. I started off the podcast just talking about how, and I've done this with my wife when she retired, is just kind of like walking through a franchise show, right? And there's maybe 15 vendors there, right? And they're all telling you how great things are, right. As opposed to, and now you just get kind of sucked in, and yet your service is free. Like, it just sounds like a no-brainer, absolute no-brainer.
I just came back from IFE last month. It's the International Franchise Expo in New York City, and that's one of the larger ones. And there were hundreds of brands. And I spoke with someone there. They were just completely inundated. Like, there's just so many brands. And I said, well, what are you looking for? And they just had no idea. They were early stages, and I offered our services, and we're speaking again in a few weeks. But it's overwhelming because you got all these brands. You love the ice cream or the sandwich, but if you envision the business having a few employees, well, food for the most part, not in every case, food for the most part is going to have dozens of employees. You don't want a storefront. You would rather run it from home. Well, that eliminates most of food, right? And in a few cases, there's a meal prep company in there, but maybe let's look at a home service business. Well, I don't have experience. I don't have millions of dollars. You don't need either one. You can start off with a much smaller amount, and you need absolutely no experience in franchising for the most part. The franchisor can coach you. They just need that skill set, that sales skill set, the networking and things like that. Amazing.
I will definitely be putting all the links to the book and your services in the show notes. But yeah, I wanted to thank you for coming on the show. Before I let you go, every guest that I have always answers the same question because the answer is always different. So this is the Investing to Win podcast. How do you define success, and what does winning look like for you?
I've been extremely successful, and everyone defines it, to your point, differently. My success is this. I built time freedom. I didn't build my business for financial freedom being my number one priority. I'm 48 years old. My son's 18. My daughter's 16. I have never missed a soccer game. I became a soccer coach. I've never missed a dance recital, Girl Scout meeting, or swim meet. So my success is what I define as family first, personal first. And I would say I'm basically 100% successful. Financially, it's been great, but the time freedom, which is my number one freedom of the 5 freedoms Dan Sullivan talks about, was my top priority. And I created my calendar based off of those priorities. And I could say successfully, I've been 100%. It doesn't happen overnight. It takes a little bit of time. I started the business before my kids were born, so that I had that buffer there. But things don't happen overnight. But yeah, pick your priorities, your why, and just write it down and look at it every single day.
Love it. Well, thanks so much for coming on the podcast. Hopefully, we'll get to meet one day in Jersey. But until then, we'll catch you later.
Thanks, Garrett. Looking forward to it. Take care.